Hi everybody, this is Kate Haley with Glazer's Camera. Thank you for joining us for this live session today. We're going to talk about tethering with Tether Tools, and we have a special guest today. A special Jeff. Jeff Carpenter is going to be joining us today. But before we get to that, I'll just take a moment to talk about things that are happening at Glazer's right now. The store is now open 7 days a week, Monday through Saturday, 9 to 6, and Sundays, 12 to 5. Our rentals department is also open Monday through Friday, 9 to 6, curbside pickup only. So if you do need a rental, we're here for you. We'll just ask that you call us in advance to book that rental and then do curbside to pick up or drop off. So with that said, I have one quick announcement, and we're going to dive right into this. Some of you might have heard, we've launched our anniversary event. This past week we started talking about it, but Friday starts our programming. We're going to do about 5.5 to 6 weeks of programming starting on Friday to celebrate 85 years in business as an independent camera dealer here in the Pacific Northwest. So I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end, but head over to glazerscamera.com/anniversary, bookmark that so you can check out the programming that we'll continue to add to and much, much more. So I don't want to take too much time because we have only an hour with Jeff. But what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about tethering. We have a fantastic photographer named Jeff Carpenter. So Jeff, can you tell us just a little bit about you, and then we'll talk about how the process will work, and we'll dive right in.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and I'm super happy to be here with you guys. So my name is Jeff Carpenter. I own a company called Ready Light Media based out of Nashville, Tennessee, or just south. We're actually in Franklin, Tennessee, but we're down here. We do a lot of corporate headshots, portraits, and then I kind of freelance out other work as well. But what we're talking about today is kind of the workflow of the headshot, specifically in studio. So we've got some stuff set up. We're going to shoot a little bit later. But I know a lot of people kind of have this, like, what is workflow? We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to try and give you some tips to hopefully, streamline that a little bit so you can go in to shoot with confidence and a little bit of professionalism, so that way we're, next time you show up to shoot, you know exactly what you're doing, and it's a breeze. So anyway, enough with that. Enough about me. Let's talk about workflow and a little bit about Tether Tools. So I want to thank Tether Tools for having me on with this, and Glazer's Camera. So let me go ahead and let's jump into PowerPoint.
Before we dive in, I want to let people know how they can ask questions during the session. If you have questions during the session here with Jeff, please post those in the comments on the Facebook Live feed or in the chat box on the YouTube Live video feed. We'll ask some questions throughout the session, probably do a little bit of Q&A at the end, but this will be designed with a little bit of presentation, and Jeff is also going to do a live demo, so it'll be super beneficial for you guys to enjoy the session and ask those questions, because if you're curious, this is a great time to ask. So with that said, yes, Jeff, let's go ahead and get into your presentation, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, so any questions, leave those. I love kind of getting them as we go. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat box in the Facebook thing. But let's go ahead and jump into the presentation here. All right, so all we're talking about today is streamlining your workflow. So what that really means is just kind of getting a workflow that works for you, no matter what you're shooting, making sure you have the same thing every time, so that way you're not kind of wondering what you're going to do, what you're going to be shooting. So that's really what we're talking about today. But in order to understand that and really get the most out of this, we need to know exactly what workflow is. So again, you might have heard this. You may know what workflow is, but you may not at all. So for everybody, we're going to go ahead and just kind of break it down in the simplest of terms. It's literally just a sequence of steps involved in moving from the beginning to the end of a project or a working process. So it's all the little steps in between from when you start a project to where you end it to kind of make everything go as smoothly as possible. As photographers, I kind of made this up, but I think it's a process that allows us to shoot with purpose, confidence, and professionalism. So as you have a client in your studio, or if you're on location, having the process and your workflow really established allows you to go from the start to the end without any hiccups. Is that the last thing we want is to have some hiccups down the line and to where we're trying to kind of fly by the seat of our pants. So having an established workflow really, really helps you kind of tackle anything that may go wrong, and to kind of plan ahead of time so stuff doesn't go wrong. So one thing to think about too is workflow isn't just a one-size-fits-all. You're not going to have the same workflow for a studio shoot as you're going to have on location somewhere. So no matter what you're shooting, really today I'm just going to talk about some kind of tips that help me out when I was shooting, just to be able to establish what's going to work for you no matter what you're shooting. So this isn't just don't copy everything down I'm doing, because it might not relate directly to you. But kind of as a whole, these are all just kind of helpful tips that I wish I had known when I had started shooting. So with that, these are some tips for a successful workflow. And there's probably more, and I may cover some things I might not actually put in the PowerPoints, but everything is so basically the first thing we're going to talk about is preparation. I think this is probably the most important thing when it comes to having a successful workflow, is you can never be overly prepared. So being as prepared as possible is going to kind of mitigate anything that could possibly go wrong. So this kind of goes without saying, but knowing what you're going to shoot before you get on set. Obviously you probably have an idea, but communicating with your client or your subject or your model, whoever you're shooting with, ahead of time, to make sure you guys are on the same page. Plan your shoot out. Just everything you can do to prepare, so that way when you get to set, you know exactly what it is. Because let's be honest, time is money. You don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste your client's time. So just kind of knowing ahead of time. And again, I know this is that seems so obvious, but you'd be surprised how many times I've kind of, back earlier in my career, I'd get there and be like, all right, well, this is a cool location. What should we shoot? And that doesn't seem professional. That doesn't seem, that's just we're going to waste half of our time that we could have had together shooting, trying to find a cool spot in this location. So moving on, prep your gear. Again, pretty obvious, but charge your batteries, clean your lenses, format your memory cards. Even if you're tethering, I tethered, I would say 99.99% of the time. I still have a memory card in my camera that's getting the images written to it. That's just kind of an extra backup that I like to have. So I like to format my card so it's not, I don't have 3 different shoots on one card. So, and you might have other gear that you're shooting with that I didn't include here. But batteries include, batteries for lights, batteries for camera, batteries for your laptop, anything like that. We'll talk a little bit about the on-site power from Tether Tools, even charging those batteries up, because if those batteries aren't charged, you can't charge other things with them. So just make sure all of your stuff is ready to go before you shoot. Again, if you're tethering, make sure you set up your tether session ahead of time. So that might be, I shoot with Capture One, so make sure you have your Capture One session or your Lightroom catalog or whatever program it is that you're using. If you're tethering, make sure you have that set up ahead of time. You don't want your client to show up and then you're, still kind of working out the final details of that. You want to have that ready to go, have that set up before they even walk in the door. And finally, for preparation, if you're using lighting, you may not be, but if you're shooting in a studio or something doing headshots, set up your lighting, take test shots. You know that you want to be able to, again, they want to be able to come in the door and they want to be able to walk right in, sit down, have a little chit chat, and then just get right to shooting. You don't want to have to set up anything while they're still there. So just being prepared, knowing what you're going to shoot, prepping everything, making sure that everything is just good to go before anybody even walks in the door. That brings us to organization. I think this is another thing. It kind of goes hand in hand with preparation, but just making sure everything that you're shooting with is organized. And almost most importantly is keeping a clean shooting environment. I know if you're on location, out in the woods, you can't exactly, you can't determine what's going to be clean or not. What I mean by clean really is just kind of keeping everything organized. When you are in a space like this one, however, though, definitely clean it. I've got 2 dogs that shed a lot, so I deep clean this before anybody comes every time. So I clean a lot. But that's just one thing. You don't want to have your client come in and you just have a dirty house, dirty studio, anywhere that you're shooting. You just don't want it to be dirty. So again, kind of along the organization, knowing where things are. And as you kind of establish your setup, you're going to have a place for things. So just kind of knowing where things are, like if you have some batteries, like I keep my leftover, or not my leftover, my extra battery just kind of on my tether stand here. If there's anything you might need, just make sure you know exactly where it is. I've got just kind of a makeup and like hairspray and comb stuff. I've got that in the corner, kind of under in a drawer. So just knowing where stuff like that is in case your client asks for it. Again, because I have dogs, I have lint rollers. So, just having stuff like that, knowing where it is, where if they're like, oh, I see this hair on my jacket, they're like, oh, I've got a lint roller, it's right here. You're not trying to like search through everything and try and find it. So just being, again, overly prepared, try and ask the questions that might get asked, ahead of time, and then knowing where things are, keeping a clean studio environment, keeping fresh batteries. Again, that goes back to kind of preparation, having everything there. But just make sure. A lot of stuff is going to reiterate itself, but that's mostly because it is really important, and you've got to hammer it in, and that's the way that you're going to kind of learn. Because you don't want to learn this stuff, in real time like I did. I'm here to tell you my mistakes so you can, learn from them. So, again, if you're shooting multiple looks, have a game plan. This kind of goes along with keeping a clean shooting environment. I'll typically start with, if I'm doing multiple looks, I'll start simple, and we'll kind of build on to that as we go. If you're shooting, I'll know you're just going to shoot one look, doesn't matter, set it up, have it ready to go, test everything out. All right, so execution is going to be kind of, your client's there, we're on set, you've done everything else ahead of time. One of the really important things that I find really helpful with my personal workflow is showing your clients what you're shooting. The last thing you want is them to wonder if you're getting good photos. And that's what's great about tethering. And that's kind of what made me fall in love with tethering in the first place, is that I can shoot and all these images are coming up right on a screen, 5 feet away from the client, and they're able to see them as they're coming in real time. I think that might be scary a little bit if you're like, oh, I don't want them to see every photo. But as you go, again, kind of going back to having confidence, is you'll get to a point where you know that every photo is going to be good. Granted, in a studio environment, you have a lot more control of that. So especially in studio, I'm tethering all the time. I'm never not tethering in any sort of studio environment. So, and that's just kind of because, again, I want to show them what they're getting. They want to see what they're getting too. If they're paying you, they want to know like exactly what it is that you're getting, what they're paying for. So again, shoot with purpose and confidence. Know what you're shooting. Test it out. You shouldn't have to worry about if the light's going to fire or not, or if it's going to look good or if it's not. If you did your test shots, you're going to have confidence in knowing what you're going to get. And when I say shoot with purpose, what I really mean is don't waste time. You don't want to have the client come in and you're kind of just dilly-dallying around. You want to make sure that you're shooting with purpose, because it's their time too. Time is money for us. Time is money for them too. And you don't want to feel like they're wasting their time. A lot of headshot sessions that I shoot are between 15 and 20 minutes. They're not long sessions. But that's because I've got everything like down to a T, and they're coming in, they're getting exactly what they need. If they want to shoot longer and they have multiple looks, it'll last longer, sure. But for just a one-look headshot session for an individual client, it's a quick session, because I know they want to get out the door and get back to their work as well. So talking to your client, keep them in the loop while you're shooting. What I mean by this is just have a conversation with them. Communication is really important when it comes to anything, especially when you're dealing with a client or subject who isn't a professional model, and they want to be able, you want to make them feel comfortable. So I'll usually kind of just keep a dialogue going with them the entire time we're shooting. And then if I start moving lights around or something like that, I'll tell them what I'm doing. I don't want to just like move it around and then they're kind of wondering like, oh, like why is he doing that? Does that not look good? So just kind of keep them in the loop. A lot of times people are interested in the gear anyway, or in whatever camera I'm shooting, what lights I'm using, why I'm doing this, why I'm doing that. So a lot of times I'll just kind of divulge that information already. just as part of the kind of casual conversation we have going. And then, again, take a break every so often. I'll usually sit there and have them sit down at the computer and let them go through and just look through all the images. And again, the reason why I do that, and I want them to look at them while we're on set, is because I want to make sure, just as much as they want to know what they're getting, I want to make sure that they're happy with what they're getting. So if they're able to sit there and look at it, they'll be like, oh, these look great, or like, oh, actually, you know what, something's going on with my hair or something, let me try this. Whereas if you didn't tether, and you just said, you shot what you thought was good, and then you send them the gallery, and then they're like, oh, like, this doesn't look quite right. Can we fix this? Can we fix that? I don't like my outfit. Can we reschedule? You never want to do that. So basically by doing it, right then and there, we're able to kind of fix those problems as they come rather than having to reschedule a shoot. Because I can almost guarantee you 0% of the time you're going to get paid for that rescheduled shoot. So make sure they're getting what they want, what they need, what they're paying for, and then you'll be happy, they'll be happy, everybody will be happy. So the next thing we're going to talk about is delivery. So take a quick water break here. So what I mean by delivery is how you deliver the photos. Seems pretty standard. It doesn't matter how you do it, whether it's WeTransfer, Dropbox, Pixie Set, gallery on your own website. It doesn't matter how you deliver things, but definitely make sure your delivery method is consistent no matter what you're shooting. Unless you're still kind of trying to figure out what it is you do. Once you find something that works, stick with it. It's the easiest way for you to keep track of things, because then down the road, if somebody's like, oh, like, where's that gallery at? If you're switching between Dropbox and Squarespace or any of those things, just keeping it consistent so you know exactly, like, hey, here's this Dropbox link again, however you deal with that with your clients. But just keeping it consistent, that just keeps it easy for you to keep track of, and it's just generally easier. Whatever your method of delivery, communicate that with your client ahead of time. It's not exactly rocket science there, but make sure that they know how they're going to get them. And that might be something that's in your contract. That might just be in the email correspondence that you have with them. They're probably going to ask again when you're done shooting, how am I going to get these? But just making sure that they know ahead of time. It's okay if they ask again, but just communicate that. And I think what I kind of hammer home a little bit is communication is key, whether it's on set, whether it's beforehand, whether it's after the fact. Always keeping a constant dialogue and maintaining that relationship with your client is really, really important. All right, so deliver your images in a timely manner. Obviously, you want to deliver them quickly, but sometimes, like, I put a 2-week time frame on after they pick, then they 2 weeks after that, they're delivered. Immediately after the session, though, if it's any kind of corporate gig, I send it to a retoucher. I'll retouch a lot of my own stuff for personal work, but if it's anything that's just kind of a standard headshot, I don't want to have to do all that, so I send it to a retoucher. She sends it back in like a day. I'll send it to the person that day or the next day. So what was them expecting 2 weeks, now it's 2 days. All that does is make me look better. They feel like they're more important. I just kind of put the 2-week time frame there just in case if I send it to my retoucher and she's really backed up, I don't want to like assume that she can do it right away. So I kind of do that more on that end. And because 2 weeks is a pretty reasonable amount of time for anything to be completed. So I just put that there. I deliver beforehand every single time. I've never delivered after the 2 weeks. But just kind of set a time frame and then make sure you deliver before then or at it. And then after you've delivered your images, follow up with your client. Again, maintain that relationship. You don't want to have, them wondering like, oh, well, it was fun, but then you never hear from them again. Because the more you maintain that relationship, the more you're going to be top of mind for them. The more they're going to tell their friends about you, or the more they're trying to tell their boss about you. They're going to tell everybody about you if you're kind of a constant in their life. I'm not saying email them, every day. But, a couple weeks after you deliver your session, just follow up, make sure there's nothing else you can do, make sure they're happy. If you have a link for Google reviews or anything like that, and you feel like you did a good job and they'll leave you a good review, send that with that. But that's just kind of basic, generic tips for workflow. And if you have any questions about this, definitely let me know. Because it is pretty vague, again, because like I said before, workflow is not one size fits all. It's really just kind of finding something that works for you and then applying that to however you shoot or however your process is. But I do want to talk about my personal workflow. So I have a couple different workflows depending on what I'm shooting. I do a lot of my work in studio, so we'll talk about kind of my personal studio workflow. And we'll kind of touch a little bit on what we talked about previously just a minute ago, but then how I kind of apply that, how I actually implement that into my own personal workflow. And if you're a headshot shooter or anything like this, you might be able to just take this and run with it if you're still kind of looking for a workflow. So before the client arrives, this is going to be kind of along the preparation lines, right? So I'm going to set up the studio with the lighting I want. That's implying that I know what it is we're shooting. So right now today I've got my studio set up, so we've got some stuff set up. I'm going to organize the gear I'll be using. Again, that's figuring out the lens, the camera, which lights I'm using, all the batteries, if I'm going to tether wired or wireless, just kind of establishing what I'm going to do with that. So I've been shooting wirelessly a lot lately with the Air Direct, and the reason for that is because I am clumsy and I trip on stuff a lot. For a shoot like this where there's not a lot of moving parts, I may tether with a cable just because the images will come in a little quicker. But I like the freedom to move around with shooting wirelessly. All right, so for me, I'm going to create a Capture One session. I create a new session for every single shoot, and if you use Lightroom, I would recommend creating a new catalog for everything, and that's just easier for me. So like every time I open up a new thing, I don't have images from a previous shoot. The only time I will keep it in the same session from a previous shoot, if it's the same client, let's say I have a corporate headshot client that kind of keeps me on retainer, and they might send me someone once a week. Instead of creating a new session every time, I'll just add on to that session because it's essentially the same client. And then I shoot Panasonic, so I have to go one extra step with my tethering because the S1, really none of the Panasonic cameras are compatible directly with Capture One or Lightroom. So you have to tether into Lumix Tether, which is just one extra step. So I have to create that, make sure that's feeding into Capture One, and then have the Capture One session. Again, I'm going to test the gear to make sure everything's working properly. That means test my lights, test my camera, make sure that I've got the Air Direct set to ADU and not mobile, so it'll go to my computer. If you have any questions about the Air Direct, I have a couple videos on that we can probably link to at some point. Or we'll have information you can reach out to me and I can send that to you. But so I'll make sure that's all working properly, and then I have backup power options. So even though I'm here in a studio with power, I will shoot with this guy right here attached to this little rolly table. So this is the Tether Tools power, it's the on-site battery, and then I have a couple other kind of power solutions throughout the studio. So this is what I have. I have it attached to my little stand here, so it rolls around with me, so I'm not having cables running all across the room. Just having this is nice. This is a must-have if you're shooting on location. I just shoot with it in a studio as well, just to have that kind of little bit more of that mobility aspect. So that'll just clamp right onto this stand, and that lives there. So that's where this, camera battery will plug into. That's where any of the other things. It's got AC power and it's got USB stuff as well. So, and again, I'm going to test my lighting. I know I tested gear before. Now I'm testing my lighting, and this means when I say test lighting, that literally means I'm taking a test shot. I'm typically doing it myself. If I have an assistant, I'll take a test shot of them. That's just to kind of get the lighting pretty much where I need it to be, before the client arrives. So when the client arrives, first thing I do, no matter who they are, what time of day it is. I offer refreshments. That's coffee, water. If it's later in the day, maybe a beer or a cocktail. Kind of read the room with that one. But just make sure they feel welcome. My studio is at my house, so I want to make sure that they feel overly welcome because it's not a commercial studio space. So they're coming to my home. I want to, have that hospitality so they feel comfortable and they're not kind of weirded out by going to a house. So that's just by offering just a little bit of refreshments, that just kind of eases it a little bit. So once you're done with that, offer refreshments, just kind of show them where they're going to sit or where they're going to stand, depending on the, the setup you have. It might be a different spot. Today, it's going to be right here. So just show them where they're going to sit or stand. And then I know we've taken test shots kind of before they get there, but we also want to take some test shots while they're there as well, because they might have a slightly different skin complexion than me. They might have a different shirt that's going to reflect light more. Just make sure that you have some test shots of them. That also kind of gets everybody on the same page. So if they're coming in with one thing in mind, you take some test shots, and you're like, oh, that's not at all what I was talking about. Maybe something was kind of lost in communication. That's totally okay. But by taking just a couple test shots of your actual client, they know what they're going to get, and we can move on with the shoot. So once you've done that, shoot, and then from there, stop and let them view the images. So I have a process. I think you can do this in Lightroom as well, but in Capture One, I will sit down and I will have my client pick the images that they want to purchase right then and there. Some people might send a gallery, and they may say, oh, let me see my husband or my wife, let's get their opinion. The problem with that is that a lot of times they don't ever pick, or they take forever to pick. So I hate having stuff in queue, and I hate having unfinished projects. So by allowing them to pick right then and there, I'm able to, get them to pick. They can go ahead and get their images selected, and then I can go ahead and send that to a retoucher, get it back. Quicker they pick them, the quicker that I'm able to get them the final images delivered. So I'll do kind of a two-step process, and I'll sit them down, and I'll just tell them, go through all these pictures, pick any of the ones that you like, pick a 5. So just select 5 on the keypad, and then if you don't have if there's not any that you like, again, this kind of comes back to why I tether. If for some reason there's not any that they liked in there, we can still shoot. Everything's still set up. We can still shoot and get something that they want. Whereas if I just sent a gallery later, again, they would have to reschedule. It's just wasting everybody's time. But by this way, so let's say they've narrowed it down to 10 images. So, my basic headshot session comes with 1 image, right? A lot of times people don't need more than 1. They just need a headshot for, their email footer or their web page or their business card. So the basic session comes with 1 image. Let's say someone booked the basic session. They're coming in. I took, being generous, I took 100 images. It's probably closer to like 30. But let's just say we narrowed it down to 10 images, right? That's 10 images that they like. And I tell them right off the bat, I was like, if you like it at all, you don't even know why, the gut reaction. We're going for gut reaction the first pass. So I'll tell them, if you like anything at all, click 5. So let's say of the 100 they went through, 5 of them were winners. So we'll go that, and we'll then move all the other ones away. And rather than taking away the 5s, what I do is I have a second tier of color selection. So we're down to 10-5. Now I'm like, okay, instead of taking them away, let's go ahead, and the ones you really like out of these ones, we'll go ahead and make those red. So on the keypad, I think for the Capture One, it's like the minus button is make it red. So basically 5 and minus. So once they'll do that, and then they'll maybe pick 3 of those. So when I'm down that much, we'll put all 3 of those together, just on the screen all next to each other, and I'll be like, okay, which one do you want? And then they'll inevitably pick one, and they'll say, I like that one, and I'll be like, I like that one too, and then we take the other 2 away, so then we have the 1. So in a process that would sometimes maybe seem like it would take a long time, I've never had a selection process take more than 5 minutes. So it's really quick, and again, that allows me to get the image to my retoucher, and then get that back to them in a super timely fashion. So, and with that, that kind of concludes this part of my presentation. So we're going to shoot a little bit. I'm going to turn on some gears so we can get that ready. I've got Cheryl, one of my friends, coming. She's going to model for me. So we can kind of just show you, I'll just show you kind of a standard headshot setup that I'll use on a pretty regular basis. And then show you kind of why I use it. And then we might go through her making the selection process so you can kind of see that in real time. So if anybody has any questions, please let me know. And I'm going to go ahead and start just powering on this gear.
So are you using, are those B1Xs or D2s or B1Xs?
B1s.
B1.
So I've got two B1s on the, and just some 1x4 RFI strip boxes.
Okay.
And then on the back, I don't shoot with a lot of lights often. I kind of keep things relatively simple, but this third light is just an old D1 250 watt second, I think. So with this setup specifically, it is pretty important that you have the same light on the front ones, and I'll explain why that is later. So it's basically two of the exact same light, and then a big octabox with any other light in the back. Doesn't really matter what it is.
And
I've got just a flip card. What was that?
No, someone was asking, do you get some wraparound from the octabox on the back?
A little bit, and that's okay. So I'll explain that in a second. So let me go ahead and make sure everything is going here. Let me make sure my Air Direct is on. So this is a good opportunity for me to talk about the bridging. So you can run, so Air Direct, if anybody's not familiar, creates its own Wi-Fi signal. And then that you go into your little Wi-Fi setting on your computer, and that allows you to connect to it. There is an option now that you can actually bridge it to a pre-existing network, so just your normal home Wi-Fi. I'm not doing that today. I'm tethered. I'm got an Ethernet cable because it's better for streaming, and then so I'm still able to connect wirelessly to the Air Direct on here. So it says I'm connected, and I just have to turn on my camera. So I was talking a little bit earlier about having the extra power, and this is an example of that. So I've got my little goodie bag here, and it's just got a power brick in there and a cable, and it's really just for this Air Direct. It allows you to hot swap the battery, or in my case, since I only have one battery, if the battery runs low, it allows me to just kind of plug direct and keep this power going without having to reestablish a connection. Because that's kind of a pain if you lose the connection and then all of a sudden you have to start the whole process over again. So the cool thing about the Air Direct too is it does act like it's a cable. Like it just basically kind of tricks your computer into thinking there's a cable connected when there's not. Now it does transfer RAW files. I personally, what I'll do is I'll do RAW and JPEG. I'll just send the JPEGs to my computer at first, just because it's going to be a lot quicker. The RAW file, like the fact that it can transfer RAW files through thin air magically is really impressive. But it's obviously, it's going to be a little slower than a wired connection. That just kind of goes without saying. So what I'll do is I'll do RAW and JPEG. I'll write the RAWs to the card on the camera, and then the JPEGs will come straight to the computer. So let me grab the model really quickly, and then we'll start going.
So while he's doing that, we'll just take a moment to talk a little bit about Tether Tools. It's funny, he was talking about workflow and how having things set up and ready to go are so important, especially if you're doing, in so many cases. I actually did a headshot session on Monday, and everything he's talking about is kind of exactly my same workflow. Having everything set up, having the tether ready to go. We actually had a limited amount of time, and that gave us the opportunity to When she came in, we were ready to go. We picked out her outfit, had the light set up, had the camera ready to go in place, tethering was ready to go. The first shot was actually a keeper, and then we took a few more just to get a little bit of variety. But I know in my personal experience, using tethering is just super helpful to let clients see that work immediately on a big screen instead of that tiny little LCD on our cameras. Not that our LCDs are bad, but a bigger screen is definitely beneficial. So thanks, Jeff, for sharing all of that. I may have filled the airtime now, so I'm going to kick it back over to you.
and to your point of the LCD screens are tiny, one major benefit of tethering is being able to check focus. Because, I feel like it's really popular right now to shoot outside and shoot at 85 millimeters, 1.4. You're going to miss focus on some of those. So just being able to tell and kind of call out the ones that aren't good right away is kind of nice. So, because you can do this to an iPad or something too and just have that pretty mobile. But let me go ahead and jump over to, this is Cheryl, by the way. She was awesome enough to come help me out, super last minute. So I'm going to go ahead and let's do capture one here. And we already have a test shot. Remember I said take a test shot? That's my test shot. But let's make sure everything should be pretty good to go. So I want to explain this setup really quickly. And let me go ahead and show you, I can show you a couple different angles here. But what I've got is I've got two strobes. These are B1, they're 500 watt second strobes. And I've got two strip boxes. What was that?
Can you turn your screen sharing off right now so we can actually see you and what you're talking about?
I forgot about that.
Nope.
All right.
Okay. We got
All
you.
right. So before I do that, see, this is why we have a team effort here to tell me when you can't see things. So we've got two strobes. These are both 500 watt second strobes. That's not necessarily important. But what is important is making sure that for this specific setup, just the way I do it, is making sure that both of them are the same. And it does help to have the two of the same modifiers as well. For this setup, I've got a big octabox. It's a 60-inch octabox in the back. If you don't have an octabox, a big umbrella does the same thing as long as you have the diffusion on the front. So what that's going to do is basically, for kind of a corporate headshot look, we're going to have white softbox is basically be a pure white background. And then these are going to be I like to have these kind of at the same power to start with. That's going to create a pretty flat light. That's a pretty standard look for a lot of corporate headshots. But by doing it this way, you can reduce the power on one of them and increase the power on the other and kind of start to give your image some dimension without adding or taking away lights. So basically, we set this up with the, anticipating kind of just altering the power on the lights. But I like to have it at the same just for the flat light look, just to have an easy, constant. I've got both of these at 6 power on this. So in my settings right now I've got ISO 100, f7.1, 200th of a second. I'm going to run it back around the back and make sure I did turn this light on. I think I did. Let's do it. There we go. All right. Yep. It went off. Always got to test it, right? All right. So does anybody have any questions about the setup specifically before we move on?
No, we're good to go. We're good to go.
Cool. Awesome. So again, what I'm going to do is the background is just a softbox. That's going to turn pure white. So can I do my screen share now?
Yes.
Is that allowed?
Go for it.
All right, cool.
We'll allow it.
All right, thank you. All right, so that's my test shot. We're going to zoom in. I'm going to take sometimes I shoot with a tripod. I always have one, and then I inevitably take it off. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to take this test shot. And we've got, right out the gate, we've got a headshot that'll probably work, right? But let's say we want to just kind of alter things a little bit. Realistically, what I would do is she's a professional model, so she can get a good photo in one take. But let's say we're not, so we're going to take a few more. And we're just going to go ahead and, shoot a little bit. And, okay, now we've got some. And Another thing too is I'm shooting these all horizontally. You might just want to ask your client ahead of time, do you want to shoot horizontal or vertical? Sometimes they'll end up making it a square, so it doesn't really matter. I just kind of like shooting in this orientation for me personally. But just kind of having that conversation, that goes along with the making sure that everyone is on the same page. One thing I didn't mention earlier either is I've got this, this is just a V-flat from V-flat world, but any fill card will work just to kind of bounce a little bit of light back up underneath. You don't need that necessarily, but having that kind of under the chin will be nice and flattering. So we've got that. Any fill card will work again. This one just nice because it stands up on its own. I do have to tell people not to lean on it because it is not a real table, and it is very, very not sturdy. So, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a few more of those, and then we're going to start kind of altering these lights, and then we'll go ahead and bring in one more piece of gear to create kind of a different look altogether. So what we're able to get is, another thing I do want to mention too is I may take a photo, and let's do it wider here. And you'll see this one here, the edges, like you're seeing the edge of the softbox. That is totally okay because nothing on her body is overlapping the edges of that. So you can easily go in like 30 seconds or less and shop the edges and just clone it to pure white from the edge. So if you need that and you're running out of space or you have maybe a smaller octabox, you don't have the giant one, that's okay. Like if you're, as long as, so what might be weird is if I came over this way and you're starting to get her fingers, that might be a little bit harder to Photoshop to get to white. But as long as she doesn't overlap anything, it is totally fine. Or even if you get a little bit of, like in the top right of this one, I got a little bit of the modifier. As long as she's not overlapping that at all, don't worry about that. So, and you might just have to tell your client that, like, oh, don't worry about that. It'll just go to pure white. So they might need the reassurance, and they might be like, hey, is that supposed to be in there? And no, it's not, but it's okay that it is. So
hey, Jazz?
The next thing I want to do, yes.
Super quick. Just curious, how close is she to that big softbox behind her?
Yes. Ooh, this is a perfect opportunity for me to transition to the other camera and then stop my screen share so you can see it. So
we're well timed that way here.
Yeah, so she is, I would say about 3 feet, maybe 2.5, 3 feet from you're probably kind of right in the middle between these two and that. So the whole shooting space, and this is actually, I've got them boomed on C-stands, which actually makes the footprint a little bit bigger. If you were on straight stands with these, you could bring it in a lot closer. You could do this whole thing in a 10 by 10 office, probably, or less. There's a lot of times when I'm going on location for any sort of corporate gig, they're not overly thoughtful with where to put me. So they'll be like, oh, we've got this empty office with a bunch of desks in the corner. Will it work? And usually you have to be, yeah, it'll work. And the smallest space that I've ever been put in was a hallway that was 4 feet wide and like 6 feet long. And I had to make it work. so being able to shoot in a small space like this, because I could bring this in and make it a lot closer if I wanted to. I just have the space here, so I'm a little more spread out. But yeah, so what I want to do now is I want to start to, the cool thing about this setup is that I'm able to start to shape light and not have such a flat look. I like the flat look for kind of a corporate look, because again, a headshot is just supposed to look like the person. We can start getting into a more creative headshot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this camera, or this strobe left of camera. I'm going to turn that down 3 stops. I'm going to turn this one, say up. Let's go up 1. So what this is going to start doing is now this light on the right is becoming the key light, and this light on the left is just kind of the fill. Whereas before it was pretty flat. So with this one, if someone's like, oh, I've got a good side, I've got a bad side, let's say we want to shoot, so right now we'd be shooting kind of broad light right here because she's facing this way. So let's say we like that, so like, okay, we'll shoot broad. And what that's going to do is now we're starting to get some shadows on that side of her face. If we don't like that, we can just swap it. We can go down to turn this one down.
Can we get a screen share of that?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Very good.
You guys got to keep me on my toes here. Okay, so can we see that?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, so you're starting to get some shadows on the right side of her face. So let's say we don't like how that looks exactly, and she's like, oh, I think it'd be better on the other side or something. So what we're going to do is we're just going to swap it, bring this one up. You can actually, with these lights, you can do this all from the remote, but it's easier sometimes just to turn the knob. So now, because she's still facing that direction, she hasn't changed her position, we went from shooting broad light to shooting short light, and that changes the shape of her face a little bit. So if I kind of go put these side by side, I didn't change my lighting other than just changing the power of them, but we changed the look of her face almost completely. So broad light will kind of make her face a little wider. That's just because it's hitting the broad side of her face. Short light, you're getting a little more shadow, so it's going to thin out her face a little bit. So if you don't know what broad and short light is, and I'm just kind of saying things, ask me about it later, and I can explain it in detail. Or I can do it now if we have time. But basically, all I'm wanting to do here is show you that you can start kind of shaping the look. And this works really, really great if you're doing volume headshots. Let's say you're going to an office and you're doing 30 people's headshots, and they want to have some dimension in the shots. You can't just do here's a flat light headshot every time. This is great to kind of cater to the good side or people's good sides that might be different, rather than taking your light and moving it from one side to the other, which can get tiresome after 30 people. With this, you can just kind of just change the power, and my fingers are getting a little workout, but not my whole body. So that's a cool reason for doing it this way. And then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to stop my screen share again.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show you one more thing. You've probably seen this B-flat sitting over here. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to put this right behind her. And what this is going to do, I don't know if you can see that from the picture, but basically what that's doing is it's actually, I think actually the other camera would be a better angle. It's creating from what was one light source by putting this, any fill card or anything will work, but putting that in front of it, what you're actually doing now is you're creating 3 separate lights. So now we've got essentially a rim light on the left side, rim light on the right side, and the hair light up top. But because we put something in front of it, we're covering 80% of the light, I have to go around and turn the power up because the light is being blocked, so we have to turn the power up to compensate for that on the back light. Does that make sense for everybody? Because I was blocking a good chunk of the light source, we're having to turn the power up to kind of compensate for that. So what this is going to do is this is going to create a black background with rim lights by just adding a fill card in front of it. So let me screen share so we can.
And we've got about a little over 10 minutes left.
Okay, I'm about done, so we can go jump into questions right now if you want. But what I'm going to do is real quick. So now we've got a black background, and I may actually. So we're starting to get this rim light where if I turn that light off, this old light is manual, so I can't change it from the remote. So just to show you what it does without that light. And so you get quite a bit of difference where you get the separation from, let me do them side by side really quickly. There we go. So the one on the left has the rim lights, and the one on the right is going to have just the front lights. And let me go ahead and show you they do a little bit of a wider shot so you can kind of see what that looks like, just so you can get a better representation of the lights itself. So now that gives you kind of good look on the background to where it's actually you're kind of creating 3 lights from one. So again, this is just kind of a way that I do. Sometimes I'll add a gel to that background light to get a colored rim light. But this is just another way that I love kind of manipulating a single light setup to get multiple looks. Because, again, you want to be able to do it as quickly as possible, and I don't want to have to set up and tear down and set up and tear down. If I can kind of plan ahead of time, be like, I want this look, that look, this look, and the other look, all with pretty much one look, that's going to save a ton of time, get them in and out, back to whatever they need to do a little bit quicker. So that's a big round of applause for Cheryl. And,
well done. No, I mean, that was a really cool trick. Honestly, like, I've been in and around this game for a long time, and I just learned something new, so thanks for that. The black foam core trick is nice. The biggest challenge for me getting foam core that size into my home is I only have 8-foot ceilings. So, those sheets are they short?
6 feet. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Unless she's like 7 feet tall, that totally makes sense. So,
so this is the same thing. So it folds down into that. So just to give
and those
you an
are
idea.
You just built that yourself, I'm assuming. Yeah.
These are from a company called B-Flat World.
Okay.
You should start selling them.
Noted.
That's a company you can make. I've made the big ones myself, but you're right. Like the 8-foot ceilings, I've got 11-foot ceilings in here, which I could totally have big ones, but I like being able to kind of just have them movable, easy, you know. So you can even, I've taken just a normal, I guess it would be like this size, whatever this would be, just a standard like one you can buy at like a Kroger or any sort of grocery store or art supply store, and you can just take A-clamps and clamp it to it. So you don't need it to be standing. So I can just like go back there and just clamp it to the light in a pinch. It works well to be able to just have it sit there, but if this is all you have, this will do the exact same thing. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's a really great tip. And B-Flat World, I know they've been around for a little bit. I don't know if I'm not sure if we have looked at carrying them yet, but I can definitely ask.
I'm on it.
Devin in the house here is already saying, I'm on it. So one question that's completely unrelated to everything is, what kind of bracket are you using? Because you've got the Air Direct on a bracket, like a vertical bracket. So is that a particular brand?
This is not. Well, this is Really Right Stuff.
Okay.
This is actually... You're going to laugh. This is a bracket that is made for, I'm shooting with the Panasonic S1. This bracket is fairly universal. It's actually made for a D800 Nikon, but I actually put it on backwards and it fits on this camera. So, yeah.
If it works, it works, just to quote Devin.
Yeah. You know, but this is what I had laying around and it worked, so I didn't feel the need to buy a different bracket. Any bracket will work, though, as long as it fits the Arca Swiss. So you also might notice that I put the Air Direct on backwards. I don't know if you can see this. And the reason for that is to be able to put it on a table without the cable getting bent. So I actually learned this from a student of mine that I did a workshop with, and he started putting it on backwards. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because it makes sense to have it go forward, but then this cable is sticking down here, and it is typically below the bottom of the camera. So when you sit it down, it puts a lot of pressure. This is why I tether wirelessly, because I drop stuff all the time. And, you know, it's just having the cable is not a good thing for me. So with this one, Tether Tools makes a bracket clamp that's an Arca Swiss compatible. So that's pretty much the universal, I think, other than Manfrotto, I think.
Right.
But yeah, so as long as you get an Arca Swiss bracket, any bracket will work.
Cool. All right. Well, if you guys, we have just a couple more minutes. So if those of you tuning in have questions, please get those posted to either the Facebook feed or the YouTube feed soon. While we're waiting, I think everyone, Jeff, and what was your model's name again? I'm sorry. Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us today. Great shots. I love the diversity in your posing. That's really great. But
so it's the whole thing. So
yeah,
I know a lot of them are joking, but that's what she's doing.
No, it's okay. It's good to have the diversity. It really is. Those are some of my favorite shots sometimes, you know. those goofy natural expressions too. So,
and I do really quick. I have a slide that has like my contact stuff with a little QR. I want to share that real quick.
Before you do that, we do have. What's your go-to lens for a headshot session like that? I heard you zooming in and out.
So this one, So this one was a. This is just the kit lens, the 24 to 105. Anything like that for a studio is totally fine. You don't need a fast lens for studio stuff typically. Because again, I was shooting at 7.1. I'm using between 5.6 and f9 in a studio. So you don't need something that goes down to 1.4 necessarily. You can, but I love shooting 85. That's kind of, obviously right in the middle of this focal length here, but the 24 to 107, that's the kit that came with the S1. Works really great for that. So
I love the 85 as well. That's my go-to for my headshot sessions.
I love that. So. I like to have the ability, I do a lot of behind the scenes, to just zoom out and then not have to switch lenses.
Yeah, totally. That totally makes sense. That's a fair argument. That's when I go to my iPhone. I'll pick my iPhone up and be like, oh, there's my BGS shot. All right. Well, I'm going to thank you for your time. Before we go, I know you want to share your contact information. I just want to take a moment to let you guys know if you registered for this session and that we have a promotion code available for Tether Tools products. You can save 10% on Tether Tools gear through 9/16. And that is with the promo code Tether10. Again, it expires on 9/16, so that's just a few days. Cables, the air direct, on-site power, lots of options for you to add to your kit. Tethering, even if you just start with a cable, if you're not ready to get into the air direct, there's a lot of options out there for you. It definitely speeds up your workflow and helps you get images that are in focus for your clients. So that's Tether10. You can use that during the checkout process, so you can order online or come in the store to pick that up. And again, that expires on 9/16. If you registered for the session, we'll send you a quick note from the Eventbrite page to let you know about that promo as well. So Jeff and Tether Tools, I want to thank you so much for being here today. Jeff, go ahead and share your screen so we can see your contact information if people want to reach out or follow you on social media and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm going to have there's a QR code on there. You should just be able to take a picture of that, and it sends you to all my links. Or if you want to type it in, go old school, that'll work as well. But yeah, speaking of test shots, this headshot was a test shot. So sometimes you can get a good headshot out of it.
Exactly.
But, anyway, again, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And if anybody has any questions or anything, I am pretty responsive to Instagram messages, or if you want to shoot me an email, if you have any questions about this, or if you want to do any sort of, I do virtual workshops. I know we're kind of in a weird time right now, so I'm doing things, it'll be kind of like this, but it'll just be a one-on-one with you and me. So if you want to do a virtual workshop, we got a link to that with that QR code. Or eventually I'm going to start doing doing my group workshops again. But if anybody has questions, definitely let me know. I'd be happy to answer anything for you. So, and again, thank you guys for having me.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeff. Before we sign off, I just want to mention one more time about our Glazer's anniversary event that launches on Friday. We have some sessions with Nikon lined up over the weekend. And the way we structured this is that between now and October 18th, which sounds really far away, but it's going to get here faster than you'll realize, we're going to do themed promotions and education. So starting off, we're going to have Nikon Days this weekend. Next week, we're going to talk about analog and printing, and then go into some Sony events, and it's just going to keep rolling. So look for our website, glazerscamera.com/anniversary. Check out the schedule, register. Registration will get you access to secret promotions that are going to be available only for those who register. So there will be some sales that are available for everybody and some that are available to those who register. So check out the details on that site. Join us for a lot of programming. We have over 30 sessions programmed so far with more to come. So if you don't see programming from your favorite brands yet, you will soon. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Tether Tools. Thank you, Cheryl, for all your time and energy and education. We really appreciate it, and we hope everybody has a great rest of the week.